The In This League Podcast Network.
Welcome in, friendos, to the In This League Fantasy Football Podcast with Bogman and The Welsh. It's us, and we are here to talk to you today about Superflex. And two quarterbacks. Those work hand in hand. It is a duo.
What? We should get rid of two quarterbacks should never exist. I will explain why later, but just as a rant starting point, two QB leagues, unless it's an 8-man league, should not exist.
Coming in with the hot HAWT takes, Bogman is two quarterbacks in Superflex, a duo like Bogman and The Welsh is for you today. So we're going to talk strategy. We're going to talk ranks, which ultimately is where the quarterbacks move, but I may press a little bit on that. And, I don't know, a little old massive player that ends a massive debate possibly got traded. All of that on today's In This League Fantasy Football Podcast, which is brought to you by patreon.com/ITLArmy. Right below on the video. We are live on YouTube. Well, not live, but we're recorded on youtube.com/InThisLeague, where you can catch some of the video versions of some of these podcasts. So you could be listening to us right at this moment. And if you were, you would see a scroll going down that says sign up with our In This League Patreon at patreon.com/ITLArmy. If you would like to support us, we would appreciate it. What you can get is the whole world, my friends. You could have access to Bogman. Bogman in your hand. I wish I could put my hand across the screen to you. Bogman could be in your hand at your disposal. Got a question? Boom. You can hit it up on the GroupMe private chat. You can hit him up on a Patreon chat anytime you need him. Day or night, He will wake up from a slumber to answer your questions, no matter what they are. He's got his ranks for Dynasty, for PPR, for Superflex. There's college stuff. I've got baseball. My ranks will be there. There's GroupMe rooms. There's secret shows. Holy crap, and a partridge in a pear tree. Come and check us out, patreon.com/ITLArmy. Support your boys and let Bogman know all his hard work is worth it, as well as mine. And we will love you a lot if you do it.
That's right. That's right. So we would appreciate that. So much fun. Julio did get traded the Welsh. So I am okay. Hold on.
Okay.
Aaron Rodgers still hasn't gotten traded, and there's no rumors. So we're both going to go 1 for 2 this offseason. That's exactly what it's going to be.
Currently, W, L.
Right.
There's an L.
We'll have to wait till the season starts for me to get my W, but I'll get it. Aaron Rodgers is not getting traded. So,
well, let's focus on the positive, friends, because like your boy Welsh said, Julio Jones was getting traded, and it was going to happen good and quicko. And we did a radio show. It was so funny. We have a show on Sports Grid, and we're doing the show, and Bogman's all like Vince McMahon strutting in like, oh, guess what? It's June 1st, and Julio Jones isn't traded. Can you believe it? I don't know, Welsh. You're a little bit concerned. You're a little bit worried. He could get traded. He probably will, but might not. I'm going to play all sides of the card. And Welsh just sat here and just went, don't worry about it, brother. We're going to be all good. And then sure enough, day or so ago, when Bogman said he couldn't and wouldn't get traded, Welsh was right. Julio Jones traded to the Tennessee Titans.
There is no one in my life that knows how to gaslight me better. Like you're better at it than my mom, so which is amazing. But
in some respects.
Yeah, well, very much some respects. So
Not
I mean, there are things that my mom will say that just make me, for a second. But yeah, I mean, you know how to gaslight me. I was not playing all sides. All I said was I thought it was going to take longer than this. I thought it was going to be closer to training camp when he got dealt. And it did not take that long at all. It wasn't the first, like you had said, but it was the 6th that he got traded. So much closer to your date than my date. So yes, you do win this one. I thought, what did you think of the return? A 2 and a 4. Is that enough?
I mean,
it's kind of comparable to the Hopkins deal.
Yeah, it's kind of what I thought it was going to be. It's so funny that people will go out and they'll just be like, let me show you all the trade. They'll show you all the trades. They're like Kenny Stills and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, I don't disagree. Like a lot of these dudes get traded for like horrible stuff. The whatever the first round pick, I'm forgetting who it was and blah, blah, blah. But the problem is ultimately there's so much money involved. There's so much money involved with Julio Jones. That's why you can't get a massive return. Like I'm surprised that it was
the Titans
simply
have to restructure a bunch of people to get him.
well,
too,
because
so.
Bird didn't get traded. That was what we had speculated.
Yeah.
We went through this whole thing on the radio where it looked like the only way for Julio to actually get moved was for Bird to go
Byard,
Byard. I'm sorry, Byard to get for Byard to get traded because there's like $15 million in cap space, and ultimately they didn't. What, like, I'm not surprised they got a 2, but I am surprised of like everything else because didn't Atlanta get like a 4 and then Tennessee got like another 6 and it was like
Julio and a 6 I believe in 2023 for a 2022 second and a 2023 fourth.
See, I think you're convoluting the I think the 4th actually went the other direction.
It did not. It's a 2 and a 4 for a Julio and a 6.
Okay, maybe you're right. Yeah, Falcons trade Julio and a future 6. Oh no, you are right. Okay, for a 2nd and a 4th. So
yeah,
okay. In my brain, I had it swapped where I thought like Tennessee was getting a 4 back, and I was like, wait, what? Like,
Houston got a 2. Houston got a 2 for Hopkins, but they also got David Johnson, who is worth more than a 4th round pick, right? So
that's I think what I'm surprised about. Like, I actually think a 2 and a 4 is about the going rate, unfortunately, for the contractual issues that Julio had. Like, I think that was part of the problem. He's disgruntled, openly kind of talking about it. Not that he was. I don't think we ever got it. We didn't get a public like, I'll only play for these couple teams like some of these guys do sometimes. So that was okay. But at the end of the day, it was just so much money. And I suppose the cap is hilarious in so many ways because it's like that team had like $3 million in space, and then it's just like, oh, guess what? We can add $20 more million.
It's so workable. It's like, why do we even have a cap?
And why was Atlanta so worried? They were in cap hell, but aren't there restructure? It doesn't matter. All that stuff aside, like, I'm surprised there wasn't a actual player involved, because one of your biggest things about all of these trades, like when the Aaron Rodgers one happened, and ultimately when you're wrong and he's playing for another team,
he won't
that
be,
or retired, by the way, is that like you were like, well, if it doesn't happen at the draft, there's just no way it's going to happen because they would want these draft picks.
But
well,
I didn't say there's no way it's going to happen. I just said that it's harder to make it happen after the draft, which is true. I mean, it was still like they got a deal done, but it was still pulling teeth. It didn't go as quick as we thought, and all that stuff. Like, if you don't deal them at the draft, it's just it's harder to make the deal immediately after the draft, because why would you? Why wouldn't that team try to get something back for this year?
Well,
I guess they were holding out to try to get something better, and then they just figured it wasn't going to happen, and he's going to keep being pissed off, and we're not going to be able to solve this problem, so might as well get rid of him. But it's just kind of ridiculous to me.
The one retort I'd have on that is, one thing that happens with drafts is the quicker you are, the closer you are to the draft, you have the tangible names that alter, I think, the value of the pick. So if you think, just for a minute here, think like Atlanta and think they're not necessarily tied to this year or next year, it doesn't really make a difference for them because they know this is like a future, move. They have a future run. Then you have a better chance at getting more assets the next year when players haven't associated and attached to them, because as teams are evaluating, pre-draft, they're evaluating, this is how many first rounders there are, this is how many good high-end second rounders, blah, blah, blah. They had done that to an aggressive degree for the following year. So there is an opportunity for a team to get higher picks into next year where, maybe a team this year was offering no more than a third. And then the idea of pushing it one more year, Atlanta was able to squeeze a 2 in, and then a 4.
To your point, also, a lot of teams considered this draft to not be great just because of the lack of depth in it. Not the talent. The talent was still good, but you didn't have as many players to choose from because the NCAA gave everybody an extra year of eligibility. So,
and it may have made teams not want to move out of the second round as much. Like, they're like, holy crap, we don't want to, we'll give you but we're not giving you a second because we're only getting 2 or 3 really good players.
And next season we'll have more players coming in probably than ever. Yeah. So, there will be first round talents available in the second round, possibly, depending on who all decides to come out. If the juniors leave school at the rate that they have been, it's going to be even more juniors than it ever has been. It's been the most. I think this wasn't the most because of the extra year of eligibility in the weird season, but I think the 3 years prior to that, every single year was a new record first year eligible players entering the draft. We're going to have that next year as well.
Yeah, I mean, no matter what, at the end of the day, I'm right, you were wrong, and that's the big thing that we should focus on in this.
Yeah.
So let's move past just me being right, because we can't have an entire show of just like, hey, Welsh is right.
Oh,
Bogman
we
was wrong.
can't. I don't believe that. I bet you could do it.
We'll try. Let's break it up a little bit. So let's talk about the actual fantasy value and the changes that happen here, because there's a lot to unpack. In some circles, AJ Brown was considered the number one fantasy receiver. I saw a couple of people put he was their number one, and they've moved him off a little bit. Now, I think that's a little more hyperbole, on a lot of sides, because it wasn't the standard. It's just like, I think a few people, but either way, AJ Brown was pretty high up the list. Now you bring in Julio Jones, and a lot of people are fighting back against moving either one of them, though I believe at the end of the day, let me make that clear how I'm saying that. People are fighting back against, like, AJ Brown should move down and Julio should both move down. They want them to stay about the same value. If I made that a little bit more clear, because your face was, you were just like, what are you trying to say?
Yeah, it didn't make sense to me, but I get it now.
Yeah, it like, people don't want to drop them because they think, okay, this is a big high power offense. They're both going to go. But I think you kind of have to drop both of them. And in early ranks, I've got Fantasy Pros up, and we'll talk about it with you. AJ Brown is not in the top 6 as far as Fantasy Pros go for PPR. Julio Jones is not in the top 12. And then one of the biggest beneficiaries, like we talked about, we'll do Atlanta's side last here, but Calvin Ridley is above both of them. And I tend to agree. That Calvin Ridley is more valuable than both on side. So talk to me from your standpoint, the value of AJ Brown and Julio Jones being teammates.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you mentioned before, you have to move both of them down, right? I just think that it's the logical play to move them both down from where you had them, because they are going to split. And look, Derrick Henry is going to get his carries. So this is still Derrick Henry's offense. It's going to run through him first. Ryan Tannehill looked real good last year. He's improved pretty much every year since he's been in Tennessee as a quarterback. I expect that to happen this year. And
I want to show you a tweet, by the way, what you just said.
Okay.
This is a great tweet by Tucker Franklin. Read it for me.
Okay. It says Julio and AJ Brown on the same team. The Tennessee passing offense is going to be so deadly. And then it says Mike Vrabel, and it's just that play of up the gut from Matt.
It's just that one gap. It's just that gap right up the middle. That is Mike Vrabel. And I think that's, I mean, jokes aside, like, it's legit in there. You think about this, that Derrick Henry, what was the carries last year? 742,
375. Yeah, that's because that's the marker, and everyone.
So,
here, I'll pull it up.
And so year, let's know that they're talking
378 carries.
Okay, he's going to have less. Okay, sure, that's going to have less, and that could equal some more passing opportunities. And the bottom line is, we know that two wide receivers can feed in the same offense. We've seen Mike Evans and Chris Godwin be good. We've seen Ridley, Julio, Julio, whatever it was. We've seen them work, but how often, and I could be corrected, of course, but how often do you see crazy dynamic duos of wide receivers end up being one of them number one, or one of the, or one not suffering at least? So is it possible that AJ Brown could be the number one fantasy receiver this year? Yes. Is it possible Julio Jones could be? Yes. Is it more likely not? I think so. I think one too hurts the other potentially could hurt one another on a week in, a week out basis, just enough where you can ride the waves that with a credibly run heavy team, they got a tight end they got two great receivers, that it's possible that both might just ding each other enough to not be top 5s. And I think that is reasonable in consideration. It ultimately comes down to who is hurt more, though, Boggs. Julio Jones comes at a much bigger discount at 13 on Fantasy Pros. You had him 9 the last time we talked. AJ Brown comes in at number 7 for them. I mean, that's quite a bit of a difference. I don't know where you currently have them. What update have you made in PPR, and like who's the guy to go after?
So it's still AJ Brown to me, because specifically in PPR, he's still a reception hog, right? So last year he had 106 targets, 70 catches. I expect that to go up this year, even with Julio. next to him. So I have him. I had him at 6. I had him 1 spot ahead of Calvin, but now I have Calvin ahead of him. I bumped him down 2 spots to 8. So same tier, but I do have him below. I moved him below Ridley and Metcalf. Those were the two guys that I had above him. Now,
okay, so Julio, you had it 9 last time. What do you get? You were very defensive, like, hey, Julio's going to be blah, blah, blah.
A little more drastic for Julio. I did move him also only down 2 spots to 11, but he does fall to a different tier for me because I think Julio is the number 2, probably behind AJ as far as catches and stuff go. But I think what it really affects all 3 of these guys, you can throw Derrick Henry in there too, is touchdowns. Who I still think Derrick Henry is going to have plenty, but if you're drafting Derrick Henry based off of the 17 touchdowns that he scored last year on the ground, you're a little bit crazy. I don't think he's going to score 17 again. So especially with Julio there and AJ Brown taking a step up. So for me, I moved him down a little bit. And I moved AJ Brown down both 2 spaces, but as far as the overall goes, Julio dropped a little bit farther than AJ Brown did. So they just don't, that tweet, while sarcastic and snarky and all of that stuff, and I've seen a million of them. NFL meme says Julio and AJ Brown going to be dynamic together, Mike Vrabel, and it's just handing off to Derrick Henry, right? So I've seen the joke a million times. But when you have a back like Derrick Henry, it's kind of how you have to run your offense. You got to run it through your big guy like that. It keeps your defense fresh as well. So I think they both can have great years. They're just not going to pass as much as they did in Atlanta. And because the defense is decent in Tennessee, it's better than Atlanta. So they're going to keep the ball on the ground more. I think Matt Ryan had something like 200 more passing attempts than Ryan Tannehill did last season, and it's not that surprising. So, but those 2 are by far the best. I mean, Josh Reynolds is a distant third now. I haven't even moved Josh Reynolds yet. I haven't made the move. He's going to drop more than both of those guys by a significant margin.
And last year, I mean, you do take about a little over 100, Jonnu and Corey Davis both off. So you take 100 catches off this team.
Yeah.
And you add Julio Jones in, and that was Jonnu playing 15, Corey Davis playing 14. And then is there a viable 3? Okay. There's an argument to be said that Julio Jones could still be Corey Davis got 92 targets. I mean, between Jonnu and Corey Davis, it equates to about 157 catches. So that is targets. Apologies. 157 targets. So assume AJ Brown goes up, who only played 14 games, by the way, and he had the 106 targets. So, whatever you get, maybe it's like 120 targets. Let's say he goes to 140 and Julio goes to, let's just call it 120. Let's break that in between because maybe Firkser gets a couple more targets as well.
Firkser should, and Reynolds is going to get some. He's not going to die, but he's not going to be out there every snap like he was before this trade.
Yeah. So if we go and look at Julio Jones, as far as those targets go, 128 targets in 2012 when he was 23 years old. He had 10 touchdowns and 1,200 yards. Otherwise, he has been 163, 200. He had another 129 season, which he did have 1,400 yards, but 6 touchdowns, 150, 170, 150. I mean, he eats in that major target range. Him and AJ Brown are kind of similar, big play guys after the run. They can get 90 catch. I mean, AJ Brown was 70 catches and all the yards. So again, this is none of it's negative. It's just that I think both
you could be realistic. That's
both
all.
Could affect, but to the point of actually what we just said, though, is AJ Brown still has potential upside with 2 other big target monsters coming off the team. It's circling into Julio, and that's assuming, by the way, we gave all of Jonnu and Corey Davis's targets to just Julio and AJ Smith, and I think maybe a couple to Firkser, to say that there's not any more to go around. AJ Brown still has the decent potential, but he might be more fluid. Julio Jones, at the better cost, is fun and nice, but still has danger. I think has danger if you're going wildly into wide receiver 1 territory. But, if you're taking running backs, he's going off as the 13th running back on Fantasy Pros, 11 in yours. They both have to affect
You mean
each
wide
other.
receivers?
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, wide receivers. They both have to affect each other. And that's why I say maybe it was always this way for a lot of people. I kind of don't remember, but I like Calvin Ridley now. And welcome other people, by the way, to the Kyle Pitts bandwagon that Bogman created before this trade was even discussed. Right. I saw some people out there talking Kyle Pitts of tight end 1 potential this season. And this is what you were doing before any trade ever went down. You had Kyle Pitts like your number 4 tight end or some nonsense, some crazy.
And I'm not going to move Kyle Pitts, but I think
because you built that in.
Yeah, Kyle Pitts is good whether Julio's there or not. So could he see more action? Yeah. I mean, really, to me, what it's going to boost him up for is those red zone targets, and that's what we want from Kyle Pitts. So I'm not going to move him. Like I said, the one other guy that I need to move down here is Josh Reynolds. I probably need to move Gage up, but I just did, this morning after the trade, I did move Julio down a couple spots, AJ Brown a couple spots, and I also moved Ryan Tannehill ahead of Matt Ryan, which I didn't have before either, because he should have more opportunities to throw the ball, and it's always great when you're getting a Hall of Famer stuck on your team in the middle of his career. So we like that.
And one thing I need to correct, I didn't realize it. I was looking at Fantasy Football Calculator. I was talking about some of those. So the Fantasy Pros actual ranks, AJ Brown is 6. And Julio is 13. So that's the one difference. I think AJ.
I think that was close to what we had. Where is Calvin in that?
Calvin is 5. So it's just a little bit of a
he is ahead. Okay.
Yeah, on the calc for whatever reason it clicked on the Fantasy Football Calculator.
Well, you got to give those, not everybody is going to just drop their rankings in right after Julio gets traded. So you have to wait like a week or two to see the real tangible results of this trade.
But their big difference was DK Metcalf was really high on the ranks that they have. So Ridley is 5, AJ Brown is 6, and Julio, who is registered as a Titan on here, is 13 in tier 3. So, Calvin, I think here's an argument you could get into is Calvin Ridley is the start of Fantasy Pros tier 2. I wonder if there's room to grow to maybe Calvin Ridley being the bottom of tier 1. I mean, I guess tier 1, the biggest argument for it being a tier is to say like, oh, if you took the top guy or the bottom guy, maybe you can't have a big disagreement. I'd have a big disagreement if you took Calvin Ridley over Tyreek Hill or Devontae Adams, but tier 1 in theirs is like Hill, Adams, Diggs, and Hopkins. Like, it's hard to argue that tier necessarily, but Ridley up, Kyle Pitts up, AJ Brown, as much as I'm saying, like, I wasn't like top 3 or 4 in AJ Brown, so I think it's relatively level. I think he can repeat if he can just play 16 games, and Julio potentially can open up more for him. Julio is kind of the big question mark, and maybe more than anybody, Vrabel's the big question mark. Where do they truly try to go with this offense? Do you have games?
You got to throw the ball a little bit more. I mean, look, just in general, without Julio, they got to run the ball a little less and throw it a little more. They just have to, And I think with how efficient Ryan Tannehill was, 33 touchdowns to 7 picks last year. He played great, I think you got to put a little more trust in him. Now that you bring in Julio, you have no choice but to put more trust in him because you have to throw the ball a little bit more. So I do think that, there's opportunity for both these guys. The one thing I'll say about not wanting to put Calvin in that top tier is let's see Calvin face number 1 corners for a full year first. You know what I mean? So that's why, and I know you weren't putting him in there. But could he finish there? 100%.
Well, and here's one of the things.
Excellent. He's a great wide receiver.
And if you want like the bullet point, the buzz point here, like I said, it's Ridley up, Pitts up. I think AJ Brown middle and Julio down a little bit.
Yeah.
The differentiating factor here, what Julio does in this offense is Julio is going to enable less double teams than a guy like AJ Brown, and it can open him up. There's also the potential for the Godwin-Evans Buccaneer issue where one appears and one doesn't in certain games. And the question mark on Ridley ultimately also is how will defenses work with him if he is the big soul guy? This Russell Gage would be another one is up. Is Julio is Ridley going to see a lot more press and a lot more coverage that maybe he can't get on the full upside and disappears in games. And that's why guys like Pitts and Gage go up. So that's, I think, the buzz points on the trade that ultimately I was right about.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Let's get into the episode. We are talking Superflex. We're going to do some strategy and we're going to talk about where some of the ranks change. Ultimately, it's a quarterback when you do 2 quarterback and Superflex stuff. But I think there's a discussion to be had strategically about how you draft the rest of them. And we will do that right here on ITL after this.
The In This League Podcast Network.
Superflex ranks and strategy, Boggs. There's a whole lot to pack with this. You've got this listed out where all the quarterbacks rank. Boom. Love it. But how you approach and how you tackle the strategy on quarterbacks and drafting them is a whole nother ballgame. So do you want to tackle some of your strategy Superflex 2 quarterback points first, and then we'll get to the ranks?
Yes. Yeah. And just real quick, at the point I made at the top of the show, why there should never be 2 QB leagues. Because in a 2 QB league, let's just say you're in a regular standard 12-man league, right, Welsh? That's what you're doing. So you're in a 12-man league. Everyone needs 2. That's 24 quarterbacks starting every single week. And then 36 would give everyone 1 backup. You don't have enough for everybody to have a backup. This is why we play Superflex. So if your quarterback gets hurt or you don't have one, your quarterback that you drafted lost his job, because somebody's going to have to be in there drafting Teddy Bridgewater or Drew Lock, right? Someone's going to have to draft Jimmy G or Trey Lance. Somebody's drafting Andy Dalton and Justin Fields. So, it's just dumb to do a 2 QB league in a league that big. Like I said, if you do an 8-man league and you want to do 2 quarterbacks, great. That's 24. Everybody has a backup, and there should be some guys on the wire, or maybe not on the wire. You're just stashing them. You get my point. For Superflex, if your quarterback gets hurt, has a bye week, gets benched, however it is, you can replace them with a running back or wide receiver who are probably not going to get you the quarterback points that you want, but they at least have an opportunity to get you some points. So if you have a big week from your number 1 wideout, if you have a big week from your other quarterback or running back, tight end, whatever, whoever it is, you are still in competition. If you just get a donut because you don't have anything in your 2 QB league, it makes it super frustrating. So I don't think 2 QBs should exist outside of CFF because there's 130 teams, or 8-man leagues, because then everybody can have a backup and have a little bit of space. So for me, Superflex only. That's all I'm going to do from now on.
Oh, okay. Okay. I think
I'll never do a 2 QB league unless it's 8-man, and I don't want to do 8-man leagues.
Okay. So that's, I'm glad, and maybe I missed it when you first started the rant, because I was about to go in on a correction here, but then you answered the question right at the end that you are specifically singling out 2 QB leagues, not just Superflex. I thought no. I thought you were interchanging them, and I was going to say that's really interesting because there's quite a movement of people that want Superflex leagues to be the standard. They want that to be a standard.
Well, look, what's the most important position on the field? It's quarterback. And that's not a question. It's not a debate. It's just period, end of story. In the NFL, quarterback is the most important position. So if you want your fantasy team to reflect reality, that's kind of what we want in these games for the most part, then you should be taking quarterbacks higher than, the 5th round, the 6th round. Patrick Mahomes, best player in the NFL. He should probably be going 1 overall. He does in a super flex. He doesn't necessarily in a standard league. I mean, he doesn't even go in the first 3 rounds.
Isn't it interesting to your point? Because one of the things I would say is like, well, you can fix that in scoring, and you have actually attempted to do this in leagues that we play in. But the funny thing is like passing touchdowns are still like 6 points, and or no, it's they inverse it where it's like rushing and receiving touchdowns are 6 points, passing touchdowns are 4 points, and it kind of it's another step to mute the quarterback position where. Right. The problem, I think, also is differentiating the quarterback position, because ultimately, when you look at stats, like, yes, there are dudes that separate themselves, like Patrick Mahomes can separate himself. But at the end of the day, quarterback 3 to quarterback 15, the difference, like, yes, you can have 18 quarterbacks to score more points than any other position player, but it's all like relatively the same. So people are like, well, as long as I keep up with the Joneses at quarterback, I win in the other positions. They see I have to take advantage in the other positions. The only other ways to do this is, I suppose, Superflex kind of cures it. It makes a quarterback more valuable because you can roster 2 and they score so many points, or you have to get creative, which a lot of people don't want to do, especially because we all sit here and we talk about the standards of leagues is you got to go out and you got to do extra stuff. You got to have, bonuses for 400 yards passing or 300 yards passing. And, you got to do as much as you can to differentiate that quarterback position. But ultimately it just doesn't help. The only thing that has ever made quarterbacks more valuable is Superflex /2 QB leagues. But to your point, I get what you're saying, why 2 quarterback leagues are out of your mind whatsoever.
Straight up, the math doesn't work.
Because there's options in a Superflex. You will see people that might, even in multi-flex leagues, grab a couple tight ends or, go all quarterbacks. Or if they running backs. If they miss on some of the elite quarterbacks, they'll go in on elite positions, because the unique thing that happens in these leagues, and that's why I think it'll be something to talk about, is that the positions fall. You have dudes that fall tons. You'll have running backs that could be second rounders go in the 4th and stuff like that. So, all right, so let's go. What are some of your strategy points here for Superflex?
You can't wait on the quarterbacks. You got to get them. I tried it in a Superflex league a couple years ago. It was a 16-man Welsh, so we were doing for an entry league, and I think the first 8 picks were all quarterbacks. And I went, you know what? Screw this. I'm taking my number 1 running back off the board. I took my running back. And then the next round, it was like maybe 1 running back went. So I'm like, I'm going to take another running back. Or maybe I took a top end wide receiver. I can't remember what it was, but I spent my whole season trying to play catch up on quarterbacks, and it just did not work. I think I had Cam Newton and Drew Lock or something. Cam Newton and whatever loser quarterback was starting for the Broncos at that point. Didn't matter. My team was terrible. It didn't work. I'm not saying that you have to take one in the first round, because you don't, but if you kind of have to follow the runs of the quarterbacks. You and I did a Superflex league in flex with Jake Seeley last year, and
we almost won it, and we went Russell Wilson and Lamar, I think.
Right. But what I was going to say,
Patrick Mahomes, but
what I was going to say about that was that we went Lamar Jackson, not Russell Wilson.
We went Lamar. I said Lamar Jackson. I said Russ first, but we went Lamar Jackson and Russ. But I said I wish we had taken Patrick Mahomes. Now that I think about it, but we were in 100% agreement. It was
Lamar.
He
got hurt, but so it wouldn't have worked out either way. But other people were taking wide receivers and running backs in that draft. So in that draft, it would have been more okay than in this other Superflex that I did if you had waited on a quarterback, right? But in the specific one that I did, when I'm picking 9, that's why if we're up front there, Welsh, again, I have to insist that we take a quarterback, because you don't know how the run is going to go, even in a 12-man, because by the time it gets back to you, 20 quarterbacks could be gone.
No, listen, I agree. You have to have some type of extra patience and something inside of you where you are comfortable drafting Jared Goff in the 3rd round, where Jared Goff is on the board and you're staring and you're like, all right, do I take, Jared Goff or Josh Jacobs? And you take the quarterback. Like, that's a rough feeling in Superflex. So I prefer to get ahead of it when possible. But listen, we come on here and we tell people to take quarterbacks, and everybody does it. And then, like, what can you do? You gotta plan ahead and as much as you can balance out your strikes. If you're at 10, you're not going to probably get the top 4 quarterbacks, but you got a legit shot at 5 or 6. It's going to hurt to take, Dak Prescott over Alvin Kamara, but you might need to do it. And then you come back.
Way more of the Wild West too, because you just don't know how that first round is going to react. So if you're picking early, I would suggest you get a quarterback. You don't have to. You can take Christian McCaffrey, which is what Fantasy Pros still has him as number 1 in Superflex. I do not. I got my top 3 quarterbacks first before them. The second one was in the first 4 rounds, I want to have 2 quarterbacks and 2 running backs. That is what I want. It's not always what I get. It's not always what I take, but I think if I'm leaving the first 4 rounds and I've got 2 QBs and 2 RBs, I am the happiest with my team, regardless of where I took them. Even if I went to running back, quarterback, I probably don't want that. I probably would prefer quarterback, running back, quarterback. But that is the way I want to lead my first 4 rounds, because wide receiver is deep this year. And in a Superflex league, just because you have to take quarterbacks doesn't mean that the running backs get better. They don't. They're still crap. So you still have to take them fairly high. And the difference between, a running back and a quarterback is that, whoever replaces your quarterback isn't going to come anywhere near to putting up the numbers that the starter does in most cases. not every case, but in most cases, if Patrick Mahomes goes down and you have, I can't remember who his loser backup is, he's not going to be nearly as good as Patrick Mahomes. It just doesn't matter. So you're not going to replace his production. You might be able to if your running back gets hurt.
I legit have to go look. Like, I have no idea. Someone immediately just said it, like in the top of their head. It's blah blah blah.
I see his stupid face because he played a couple games last year.
Oh yeah, duh. Chad Henne.
Yes, yeah. So I knew it was a Big Ten quarterback, Chad Henne. So you're not going to get the same thing if if whoever gets hurt, you may have. You're gonna get more out of your backup running back than you are even if Derrick Henry gets hurt. You're gonna get more out of Darrington Evans than you would out of Chad Henne, is all I'm saying. So quarterbacks less replaceable. So that's how I like to go. And I'm taking the lower ranked quarterbacks earlier than their rankings most of the time because number one, you need a third stringer for when a quarterback A gets hurt, or B, everybody's going to have a bye week, right? So, you have to replace those guys during a bye week. It's a little bit leaner in Superflex because you can replace them with a wide receiver, a running back, tight end, however you want to do it. But I think it's smarter. And even if you don't need that third quarterback, if they're good, you can sell them for a king's ransom. They are worth way more than they are in a standard league, your bench quarterback. So take them early. Get three at least.
I ended up selling a secondary quarterback because I had got like a really good third one for like Julio Jones in a league.
Right.
2 years back in a super flex. So that type of stuff happens. I'd also point out an extra little marker for this is don't be afraid of some of the high-end rookie quarterbacks if they fall, because one thing you can attempt to plan to do theoretically is, if you've got two quarterbacks with a higher bye week, maybe it's like 8 and 11 or something like that. Guys like Justin Fields and Trey Lance, if you miss out, they could be starting quarterbacks at that time. And then, you've drafted, if Trey Lance were the starting quarterback today, he would probably be inside the top 20 or something like that. So, you could get that value if you take them later, even if they're not playing early on. I'm not saying you necessarily should. Hey, if you got the opportunity to take, Josh Allen and then Jalen Hurts and then also Tua Tagovailoa, like, good on you. You put yourself in an extra step ahead. But some of those rookie quarterbacks, it's just like rookie running backs. If you can get them at a backup value that they just don't play for 6 weeks and they come in, good on you, man.
Yeah, exactly. So you can sell for a king's ransom. And then the last point I want to make on Superflex is that, it's going to be hard to save your fab money. So maybe take a little less injury risk in a Superflex league, because everyone burns their money on quarterbacks when the job comes up, and you still have the normal stuff that you always have with fab. Running backs getting hurt, position players getting hurt, whoever getting hurt and having to replace them. So if you're doing a Superflex, you either have to allow for $0 bids, which is something you usually have to make the setting for, just so you know, or I would do like $1,000 instead of $100. You know what I mean? So if you have to put $1 bid on someone at the end of the year because you've burned all your money, at least you can. So that is just something to keep in mind as well. But those are like the differences between a normal draft and a Superflex draft, in my opinion.
So ranks. Let's talk about ranks for a minute. I want to talk about the quarterbacks, but I want to press you on something real quick. With this, positions are going to fall. And I know ideally and you may have done, and that's okay, is you can look and you can say, all right, well, I just take my PPR ranks and then I just adjust the quarterbacks into where they go. But are there tier changes of players that you have to start looking at? And, can players change their value just based on moving into a Superflex format? And this is a twofold question. Take Fantasy Pros, for an instance. They still have Christian McCaffrey as their number one in Superflex, which I think creates and gives Christian McCaffrey. If you put a quarterback, I just want to point this out, maybe for them to even think about, is their top three, their three guys in tier one are McCaffrey, Mahomes, and Cook. If in Superflex, you are putting a quarterback in between two running backs, you've identified Christian McCaffrey as a tier of his own in value. The PPR as well. if you are willing in Superflex to jump him in,
or
that is
at least him and Cook, right? Yeah.
maybe. Yeah, well, yeah, to that point too. I mean, you should consider that they put Cook in there, that McCaffrey almost becomes his own tier. So those changes, like they kind of point that out to me, where I see McCaffrey and Cook, boom. And then, you still don't see a wide receiver in part 2. But so I ask you that. And then also, do you think there's any actual physical player changes where, you might be willing to move AJ Brown up or a certain running back above another guy? I mean, is there any tangible change outside of quarterbacks that happens in Superflex for you?
There's not much. There is a little, but like I said, Superflex is more fluid. I like overall ranks even less in Superflex than I do in a normal PPR league, because you have to follow the run. You know what I mean? Like, so you have to kind of adjust that as you're seeing what's going on in your draft. You can't go off of anybody's ranks. You can't go off mine. You can't go off Fantasy Pros if your pick 9 and the first 8 picks are quarterbacks. You know what I mean? Like,
well, you mean you still can. You just can't go over an overall. You want to go positional.
Right. Well, what I'm saying is, if you can still take Christian McCaffrey, but if my rankings, right, because I have CMC fairly high on Superflex as well. So if you get to my spot and your 9 spot, your 10 spot, wherever it is, and CMC is the first guy on your board, great. Take CMC. You're getting great value. You're getting him later than he should go, right? But then if you come back around and now Davante Adams is next on my board, but only one other running back is gone, and it's all quarterbacks, you better get your ass a quarterback. So I think it's just harder to put into practicality an overall ranking, because Superflex drafts, there's not a standard draft. There's standard rankings, but there's not a standard way to draft. So you have to follow that QB run. After that, it slides pretty much into the same as far as running back depth and wide receivers. They all stay the same. So but like I said, in your top 4 rounds, I always feel the best when I leave with 2 QBs and 2 RBs in the first 4 rounds, because wide receiver is so unbelievably deep. That's how I want to do it.
Yeah, and I think from a strategy standpoint, it also says, like, you're less likely to own Davante Adams and DeAndre Hopkins, though I think there is an advantage to consider. This is what makes this so difficult, is there's an advantage to consider in Superflex of having positional dominance more than any other, because, if you can have the 2 quarterbacks in positional dominance, it puts you an extra step above, I think, even than like a standard PPR. Like, if you were able to get, I mean, it's so difficult to manage, but if you're able to get 2 like really decent quarterbacks and you had a guy like Travis Kelce, you have the positional dominance right there. Or even if you got a Davante Adams or Tyreek Hill, kind of you have the best at that position, where they will fall off at some point. They're all going to be dragged down. The balance is having positional dominance outside of quarterback while still maintaining 2 decent quarterbacks. That's what makes this so tough.
I'm more willing to wait on running backs in a standard draft than I am to wait on quarterbacks in a Superflex draft. I think that's an important distinction to make.
And it's interesting because it is counter to what a lot of industry people will do. Like, I remember Sealy was kind of shocked we took 2 quarterbacks in the top 2, and it's like, why? Like, we can roster both of them. We have dominance. That
just do the math, dude.
It's just but what's so funny about it is you have this format, and so many people push back and still want the late quarterback thing, which it's not the worst thing in the world, but the amount of people I saw last year that were, putting their hat on quarterbacks, it just didn't pan out. They're not even
Jacoby Brissett,
close.
right?
Give me Jacoby Brissett and Jameis Winston as my 2 quarterbacks.
Yeah,
exactly.
Cam Newton didn't pan out.
Yeah.
Drew Lock wasn't great. You know what I mean? There were so many of them that don't work out, and there's those guys. This year isn't going to be special. It's going to be just like that. There's going to be guys that don't work out.
Yeah. All right. So looking at the ranks then, how do you want to do this, Boggs? Because I've got Fantasy Pros up. We've got yours. People can check out the Superflex overall, which when I'm looking at it, just to give people some insight, Bogman has 5 quarterbacks and 1 wide receiver. So that would make 6 running backs all in the first round. Fantasy Pros also has 5 quarterbacks inside. And when I say first round, I mean top 12. They also have 5 quarterbacks listed, but it looks like it's a little bit more sporadic. And do you want to go through the 5 quarterbacks that are in your first round?
Yeah, sure. My first round QBs here are Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and Josh Allen. I have them 1, 2, 3. So
Josh Allen, 3 overall above Christian McCaffrey, who, when I look at the Fantasy Pros on Superflex, they've got Patrick Mahomes 1. Interestingly enough, Boggs, they've got Josh Allen as the number 2 quarterback, 4 overall. And then it's Kyler Murray, number 7 overall, who's the 3rd quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just not willing to take Lamar out of the top tier. So you know that. So he's going to stick at my number 2 quarterback. They're going to pass more this year. They're still going to go RB by committee, which means he's still going to be running. So give me Lamar at number 2, and we already went over that as far as rankings, and we've already talked a little bit about my QB rankings. So it's just kind of where I have them. But I've got 1, 2, 3, and then my other 2 quarterbacks in the first round are Kyler Murray. I have at 6. And Dak, I have at number 7 overall.
I feel like Dak is one of my favorite value. I gotta be honest with you. Like, I wouldn't take the risk and be like, oh, guess what? I'm in a super flex and everybody says it ranks only 5 quarterbacks in the first round. So I want to be the back end. It can turn sideways really quick. Like,
it can.
If I say, hey, I really love the wheel, and then 8 quarterbacks go and I'm at the wheel and I'm staring at, Ryan Tannehill is my top quarterback, who looks a lot better, by the way, now. It's Ryan Tannehill or
Devontae Adams,
or Devontae Adams, or Derrick Henry,
Travis Kelce,
or Alvin
somebody.
Kamara. And I'm looking at that. Like, that is a decision I don't want to be faced with. But let's say things work out how we expect them to. I love the idea of smacking back-to-back Prescott and Wilson. I absolutely love it. Or, if I had to press a little bit and I ended up getting Kyler Murray and Herbert or something like that. I love the back end of a 12-man superflex. The deeper the superflex, the more I would hate it, to be honest with you, because there's more of an opportunity for the big guys to go. But I still don't mind it, because even if you got one of those quarterbacks in a deeper one, let's say you got Russ Wilson, at 12 in a 16-man superflex, you have the opportunity to, get another quarterback, or you can get an elite, probably running back or wide receiver. And then in the 3rd round, maybe you'll get lucky enough to snap up a Joe Burrow, or, Jalen Hurts would be a really deep afterthought, I suppose, or Carson Wentz or Ben Roethlisberger or something like that. And then 4th round, you're going to get more value. So I really like the back end of the 1st round, because I think all of those quarterbacks are elite. I even like Wilson kind of in that same tier, and then not far behind, the Herberts and the Bradys and stuff like that. It's not a bad space.
And it's kind of funny, because it's almost the same plot down to the lower end of quarterbacks. I just have quarterbacks a little bit higher than what Fantasy Pros rankings does as far as my groupings. Like, my next group, I got Wilson, Herbert, Rodgers at 17, 18, 19. They're 21,
That's kind of
22, 27. Right, exactly. And then I have Brady, Tannehill, Stafford, 31, 32, 33. I have Hurts at 34. Their rank on Fantasy Pros when I was doing this over the weekend was 35, 44, 40, 34. So they're all kind of in that range. Just for me and my rankings, I have the quarterbacks a little bit higher than the overall ranking does, just because they're important. They're just the math between a QB and like a QB2 and an RB2. It can get up to, 20 points, 15 points a game. So I'm going to take the points with the quarterback.
Of your top 20 quarterbacks, there are only 2 that the Fantasy Pros consensus Superflex ranks are higher on the overall than you. Now, the positional stuff differs, but there are only 2 quarterbacks that are higher on the consensus than Bogman is on them. Said players.
Lamar's one.
No, you're higher than Lamar. I'm saying you are.
You're right,
you are
okay.
higher than.
I got it backwards. Okay, I got you.
Joe Burrow is the first one, who is 42 overall on Fantasy Pros. And mind you, that is like about 16 quarterbacks deep on Fantasy Pros. Joe Burrow comes in at 42. You have Joe Burrow at 59.
And overall. I moved him up. I moved him up at least a couple spots off of my last ranking. So I may move him up a little bit more. I mean, it was pretty big playing in OTAs, and he has great wideouts and everything and a bad defense, but then he still bothers me. It still bothers me a little bit.
The other one that you've got is another in your division. No shocker. Baker Mayfield is the only other one. You have at 84. He comes in at 69 on the Fantasy Pros. So mind you, again, like, listen to the names inside. I want everyone to realize here are some names inside the top 50, even for Fantasy Pros, of quarterbacks. Top 50 overall. You've got Brady, Ryan Tannehill, Jalen Hurts. You actually, you are dead spank even. I think it's the only guy that you are even on with Fantasy Pros. You both have Jalen Hurts at 34 overall. You have Matt Ryan inside the top 50, top 75. Fantasy Pro, I mean, they have Burrow inside the top 50. But you're looking at guys like Carson Wentz, Kirk Cousins, Trevor Lawrence. That's why the changes happen. But Burrow and Mayfield, the two that you have not as high. Otherwise, every other quarterback inside your top 20 is higher than the consensus Fantasy Pros ranker. So if you're looking,
well, if you listened
drafting,
last year, you guys know I love Burrow, but if you've listened ever, I don't like Baker Mayfield. So the Baker Mayfield one is not that big of a surprise. I'm just surprised everybody's just willing to throw Joe Burrow in there as a number QB1 coming off the knee injury that happened late in the season last year. He's a tough guy, and he's already been at OTAs and all that stuff, and is being a good team leader, and I would expect nothing less from him, but he is not 100% yet.
No. So that's how the tiers differ. If people want, you can check it out, patreon.com/ITL Army. You can see it. I had a couple last little things here. Your deep quarterbacks. I do want to talk about how you position them on the overall in a second, but who are your favorite deep quarterbacks if you're going to tackle? Because you're already relatively aggressive. I will tell you, there are 7 quarterbacks inside a 12-team first round that you are going to be aggressive on, and you're showing in your rank. And then you've got, a handful more in the 30s and stuff. But if you're going to start digging deep, where are and whom are the guys? Because you're higher than everybody on all the quarterbacks. And that's what I was about to say is if you are looking to draft quarterbacks, you come to Bogman. Bogman is going to have your aggressive plays for quarterbacks. Who are your favorite deeper guys to tackle?
Honestly, I think it's Zach Wilson is probably my favorite because
Really?
he has the job. Like, he's not going anywhere unless he gets hurt. So he's the guy there. They're not going to go to whoever. Once again, I can't even remember who is backing him up now in New York now that Sam is gone. So I like him a lot. I got him at 117. Fantasy Pros has him at 141.
The backup is James Morgan.
Oh, from FIU, James Morgan.
Dexter Morgan's brother.
Captain Morgan ain't gonna beat him out. So take Zach Wilson, and then Drew Lock. I think this job is still Drew Lock's job. 121 for me, 178 overall. If you have to handcuff Aaron Rodgers if you draft him, you have to take Jordan Love. So go ahead and take him. If you take Aaron Rodgers, especially the earlier you draft, the more you're gonna. The less you're going to know about that situation. So you absolutely have to handcuff. And then, I don't know. Like, I
think there's 2 enticing ones that, there's really like 3. I think that middle bottom tier, getting to the middle of the quarterbacks, but even near the bottom are going to entice people enough to want to wait a little bit. When you see a Carson Wentz, Indianapolis, you see a Jared Goff going to a new space. But I look, and the 2 that jump out to me are Tua Tagovailoa and Jameis Winston, who's outside the top 100. And they're saying, some early, stuff that we saw said that he's kind of entrenched as a starter. So you've got Jameis Winston.
Oh, he's not entrenched as a starter.
I thought I just saw that he was entrenched as a starter.
No.
Why is he not entrenched?
Because they still like Taysom Hill, which is why I have Winston low. I think Winston gets this job.
Oh yeah, I see. Right.
But
not solidified as a starter.
Taysom Hill is still in that mix, so I'm not going to put him up much higher than that until we do get the word, because Sean Payton's a freaking weirdo.
What rookies? Real quick, a couple quick hitters. What are you?
Wilson's the big one. I want any of them. I'm willing to go in, including Mac, and Mac's going to be the cheapest. I think he gets close to half the starts this year because Cam Newton is not looking great. So and he already banged his hand on somebody's helmet and had to go get x-rays for that already. So I like Mac Jones, and I like him the most because he's wearing number 50 right now, which really aggravates the Welsh.
Hate that the most. The last thing I guess I'm just surprised about is how we talk about quarterbacks. But when you look at the overall, like I said, you only have 7 in the top 2 rounds. And then, in the middle of the third, you've got Brady, Stafford, Hurts sitting in there. And I think Hurts has some decent upside to play. And then there's another big gap that goes into like the 5th round. So it's like first, second, mid third, then the 5th, And then like there's little sprinkles in here. Like, how hard are you willing to deviate off of this? Because you don't seem to be as insane about moving them up into bigger tiers.
But I mean, I've already kind of said that. That was my point about not liking the overall rankings because Superflex is so weird. You know, so you have to kind of watch the flow and watch the runs of the quarterbacks in your league. I'm more than willing to move the quarterbacks way up. If they start going off the board, I'll take 2 in the first 2 rounds. I have no issue with that. And I will pass up some big names if all the other quarterbacks are gone. I will go over a big name running back or wide receiver, specifically wide receiver, to take a quarterback just to make sure I'm getting those points solidified on my team for the year.
Well, friendos, you guys can check out all of the ranks that Bogman has at patreon.com/ITL Army. That's where you can check it out. Next week, we are having a Superflex mock draft. So you're going to be able to check it out for yourself. You can check out
secret mock again. So
we can do another secret one. It's hidden from me. Okay.
Yeah. Cool. That was fun last time. We got to do that again.
All right. And then next month, I'm going to hide them for you. So secret Superflex mock draft that our ITL Army members are going to take part in. We'll be breaking down and we'll be going through all the nuts and bolts of it. But if you want to get prepped, you can check out the Superflex ranks now, and then you can check out all the funness that's going to happen next week. So come and sign up, patreon.com/ITL Army. Support your boys. We appreciate it if you would do so, and follow us on Twitter at The Welsh, at Bogman Sports. In this League Fantasy Football Podcast, we are out of here. Bye, friendos.
See ya.